Okay, 15 minutes has passed. Put the pot in the sink. Basically, don't make sure when you run your water in, you don't run it down the side of the pot or on top of the lid. What you want to do is submerge the pot to the point where it's starting to float. Depending on the liquid amount you got in here, this pot's pretty full. It'll let it go on up pretty good inside. You just kind of need to stay here with it and watch it. You can play with it until it starts having buoyancy. Cut the water off and then basically just let it sit and chill. Or you can, if it's heavy like this one seems to be, just kind of watch the sides. Once the water, it's not trying to float yet. Once the water gets a little over halfway up, just go ahead and cut it off. Alright, it's pretty good right there. It's winter here in North Carolina right now, and it is really cold. Just make sure the water doesn't go up over the edge of the pot and get in your starter liquid. And basically, this water is super cold out of the tab. It's already started to warm up a little bit from where that pot was really hot. Let it sit for about 5 minutes, and then after that, drain it out, fill it back up. Each time that you drain it and fill it back up, it will take longer for it to get warm until you reach the point to where it's at pitching temperature. Technically, it only has to be underneath 90 degrees to go ahead and pitch the yeast, but everybody seems to prefer to get it down under 80. A lot of people like to get it down close to 70. As long as it's somewhere between 65 and 75, you're good to go. You can actually 65 to 85, but it's safer if you're under 75. The yeast seems to like that better. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this off, let this sit for a few minutes, about 5 minutes, and then I'll drain it out and fill it back up. Once it goes through this process for probably about 15 minutes, it should be cooled down. This is where you need a digital thermometer to check it. Make sure you sanitize your thermometer before you stick it in there, because anything that touches it after this point, when you start cooling it down, has to be sanitized, or you will possibly contaminate the wort, and therefore you will contaminate your beer. While this was on the stove, I went ahead and filled my airlock up. The cup trick again I was telling you about, this had sanitizer in it, so it's perfectly okay to sit that in there. I filled the airlock up with spring water after I sanitized the airlock, of course, and the bung, and then just leave it sitting there until you get ready. After you pitch your yeast and get everything in there, then you can just pop it right in the top of the growler, and that's pretty much it. So we'll let this sit for about 5 minutes, and then I'll drain the water out and fill it back up and go through that process probably about 2 or 3 times, and it should be cooled down. With as cold as the water is, it's not going to take this long to drop. And actually go ahead and just check and see where it's at right now. Just be careful when you pull the lid off. It's really super hot. Set that down for a moment. You can see the steam blowing out of it. It's no need to check it right now. That thing's way too hot. I'll just let this thing cool off for a little bit, and then I'll be back and we'll check it then. Okay, I've filled it up and drained it twice, and I went from boiling down to 82.9, 83.2. I think it's going to wind up leveling out somewhere around about 83 degrees. So one more fill up and drain, fill it up, let it sit for 5 more minutes, drain it down. Should get it down into the mid to low 70s, and that's perfectly fine pitching temperature. So I'll be right back after that happens. Okay, I went ahead and drained it and filled it up and drained it one more time, and on the third time I am down to, stir it up just a little bit, make sure you get a good accurate reading, and don't stick it on the bottom of the pot when you put it in there. You'll read the pot temperature, not the wort. I am at 71 degrees Fahrenheit. That is perfect for pitching. So I will cut this off, get this set up, and show you how to pitch your yeast. Okay, what I've done is I cut the yeast pack open and I went ahead and poured it in. Some people pour the wort in first and then put the yeast in after it. It doesn't really make any difference. long as you get it in there. They're both in there together. You can see the yeast in the bottom of the growler. The reason I do it like this is when I pour the yeast starter wort into the funnel, it washes any of the yeast that's stuck to the inside of the funnel down into the growler. And you want to make sure you carefully, as you can anyway, pour this in, and if you spill a little bit, don't worry about it. This thing doesn't have no spout thing on it, so you're going to lose a tiny bit. Don't worry about it. That's why it's in the sink. And you can see it's already foamed up as you poured it in a little bit. Shake it till you get it all out, and then just set that to the side. Crash. And nice thing about having it in the sink, just turn on a little bit of cold water, rinse off the side of the growler. Make sure you don't get no water down in the growler. Cut that off. Let it drain. Alright, you can see the funnel's spick and span clean. No yeast stuck to the inside of it. You can go ahead and pour that out, pull it out. And here's my airlock. It's already filled up full of spring water. Some people use vodka. If you want to spring for some cheap vodka and put in there, that's fine. I think that's kind of a waste of money on a yeast starter. Maybe on the wort I could see justifying it. Everything's good and clean. You just go ahead and put your bung into the top of the growler. Push it down in there. Give it a little bit of a twist. Make sure it seats good. And you can see the yeast is floating inside there. Let this sit for 15 minutes so the yeast can hydrate. The yeast will absorb the wort and start sinking. After this sits for 15 minutes, you can give it a good swirl and combine it, and then pretty much after that you just let it sit and wait. You can after about 8 to 12 hours you'll start seeing some airlock activity. You can actually already see some airlock activity right now. This bubble over here that's on the side that's coming out has already pushed the other side up just a little bit. So basically just let it sit for 15 minutes, give it a swirl, and then after that, about every couple hours if you're home, just pick it up and give it a swirl. And after about 8 to 12 hours, you will start getting airlock activity, and you will start smelling fruity, yeasty esters coming out the airlock, and that's a good sign. That means everything's happy and your yeast are multiplying. And so now we just wait a little bit and give it a shake, and then we're done. Well, I gotta say, that's the fastest I've ever seen airlock activity. This thing's been sitting for 15 minutes and it's already bubbling, and I haven't even shook it up. After it's sit for 15 minutes, you can already see the yeast in there. They're kind of congealed looking. They've started absorbing. Some of them sunk to the bottom. Just pick it up, give it a good shake. You can see the airlock. It's already starting to bubble. Just give it a good swirl for about a minute. And what this does, it does two different things. It shakes, it combines the yeast into your starter, and it aerates the wort. The air that's left inside your container will get mixed in with the wort. The yeast will eat the oxygen out of the container, and after all the oxygen is gone, then they will start eating the sugars. And after that, you can see this thing, the bubble's already pushed over. Give this thing a good shake. Get a better grip on this thing with a different finger. There we go. Just keep checking. You can see it's already super milky looking. There you go. It's all milky looking, you can't even see through it. Let's keep shaking it. This is kind of the poor man's way of aerating. You can use a fish tank air pump hooked up to a bubbler and stick in it. Just make sure it's sanitized before you put it in there. Some guys take those stainless steel air bubbler extensions and hook them up to a pure oxygen tank. That works really well because you're putting pure oxygen in it. I just do the old school cheap ass shake and swirl. Alright, that's pretty close to about a minute. Close as I'm gonna get it right now. And you can see how milky it is. And you can see there's a couple little pieces of yeast up on the side. If you see that, just go ahead and swirl it until you get them all back down in there. Kind of look for that because that will happen. Okay, looks like they're all back down in there now. Or not. There we go. Turn this where you can see the clear part. And that's pretty much it. That's how you do a yeast starter. Now basically you just let it sit for about at least 24 hours and up to about 3 days. After 3 days it will slow down and it won't really be doing anything after that. It'll go ahead and eat everything out of it, and you don't really want to wait beyond that to pitch it because it takes the yeast a little while to kick back in and start fermenting your beer, your wort. After you do that, if you pitch it on about the second day, it will do a lot better, unless the yeast is no good, and then you may want to wait at least 3 days before you pitch it to give it more time to reestablish the colony. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. That's my version of how to do a yeast starter. Thanks for watching.